What are you worried about? No, I mean, really, what are you worried about? Because if there's one thing that brings us all together in this room, it's the commonality that we're all worried about something, aren't we? You're worried about your health, or you're worried about relationships. Maybe you're worried about your faith, your finances. It could be any number of things, but you're not normal and you're not human if you're not worried about something. And so before we begin, I really want to make a couple of things clear from a scriptural point of view. And the first is that worry is not in and of itself a bad thing. Worry is not a bad thing. Worry is like anger. It's a signal. It's a built-in signal that something is wrong, or at least we think there's something wrong and we have to do something about it. It's not whether you worry that's the problem. It's how you worry and what you worry about that often gets us into trouble. But recognize going in that Jesus never once in Scripture asks us to deny that we're worried about something. He never asks us to deflect that worry into something else and to pretend that we're just okay when we're not. And he never asks us to delay the worry either. If there's something that needs your concern, if there's something that you need to be worried about, then give yourself permission to be worried about that. But let's do it in the right way, in the way that God would have us be worried, because that's really the crucial issue, it seems to me. Now, I want you to think for a minute about the things that are worrying you in your life this week. I don't need to know what they are, but I already know that they're probably not much different from what other people I know, maybe even much different from what I'm worried about. I think we have, as I said, this human condition that makes it almost inevitable that we're going to have to be concerned about some things. If we're not concerned at all, that's certainly not a good thing either. So again, it's not whether you worry, it's how you worry and what you worry about. That is the crucial test. Now, when we do have concerns, I think it's fair to say that what we want is deliverance and detours, and what God wants is devotion. What I mean by that is very simple. A lot of the times when you're faced with a situation that's going to be uncomfortable, one that you have some anxiety about, the first thing that you want to do is to go to God and to pray that He's going to take that away. And that's natural, isn't it? Why would we want to go through anything that's not comfortable, anything that's going to challenge us, anything that's going to be painful? It makes sense. We want God to deliver us. And if He's not going to do that, then just give us a detour, some way around the problem so that we don't have to confront the things that we are concerned about. And what happens too is that we tend to look at all of the things that we are concerned about, and we have a very human look at that. We have a perspective that's founded on very material and physical things. We want good health. We want our finances to be okay. We want our relationships to be healthy. And yet, amid all of that, although God is concerned about those things, what He wants more and what He wants most is that we will have a spiritual attitude toward the worrying that we have to do. But let's be clear, worry in and of itself is not bad. It's not unspiritual. What I'm talking about is the kind of natural concern that has to be there if we're going to be effectively dealing with the things that come into our lives. What the Bible talks about when it talks about worry is more the kind that paralyzes us into inaction or paralyzes us into a state where we just don't feel like we can do anything, that God can't do anything. And that's why I want to go today to Matthew 6. Now, this is not a passage that I would, at least for all of it, not a passage that I would automatically go to talk about worry. And yet I think it's something that we really need to look at, because I'm going to give you 5 quick points today, and then I want to really hear what you have to say about this topic, because I know that you're a bit of an authority on this, at least for your life. And if there is one recurring theme today, it is that anxiety, worry, is a heart problem. We all know that anxiety in the extreme can give you a heart attack. What you may not realize is that worry and anxiety are a heart attack. It has to do with the condition of your heart, and that's something that Jesus is talking about here. And if you look in verse 19, he says, "Don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat and rust destroys and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasure in heaven, where moss and rust cannot destroy and thieves can't break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. So point number one, and yes, this does have to do with worry. Point number one, worry is normally related to what comes first in your heart. Let me say that again. Not always, but worry often is related to whatever comes first in your heart. What is it that you have stored up in your heart, in your thinking, in your lives that is most important to you? And if you're puzzled by that question, it's very simple. I want you to look at what you spend most of your time and attention on. What do you think about the most? How do you spend your energy and your money? What preoccupies you? Because that will help you identify what the important things in your life are. And they tend to be the physical things. And again, I'm not trying to berate anybody for this. I am no different than you are. When I am hurting, when my health is at risk, I want God to step in. I want Him to fix that. But I think that what often happens is that we are so busy looking at what we want that we forget that God is working in each and every situation that we find ourselves in. And maybe His perspective is a little bit different from ours. Because while we're so busy hunkered down, worrying about the things that are going to make our lives comfortable and easier and better, God is looking at something deeper. Because you and I are always looking for solutions. God, I just want you to fix this. And instead, God is looking at us. He's looking at how we react to the challenges that come into our lives. And the harsh reality is that when you look at the things that are really troubling you and the people that you love, God is sometimes going to intervene in a miraculous way. If we don't believe that God ever does that, then I don't see any reason for us to pray. But we also have to recognize that by their very nature, these miraculous events are not going to be common, and that most of the things that you and I have to deal with are not going to have a solution-based ending. Because God doesn't specialize in the destination. He's more concerned about the journey. And so for all of the times when we ask God to take these things away, it seems to me that what we need to be doing is finding out what's really in our hearts. Is that what our life is about? Just avoiding all of these circumstances and situations so that we can be comfortable? Or is our life about more than that? Is it about being rooted and established in God's love and His power? Because that is a much bigger issue. And so instead of perhaps praying about outcomes all the time, maybe what we need to be doing is that God will be working in, with, and through us, especially in the challenges. Because here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. If you pray for deliverance, and if you pray for that detour that I talked about, there will be many, many times when you will be disappointed because God's not going to do that. He's not going to take it away. He's not going to make it go away. He's not always going to give you the resolution and the ending that you want, the desire of your heart. But He will always, always, always give you the things that are most important to Him, the ability to get through anything and everything. He will bless you with strength, wisdom, clarity, perseverance. He will bless you with love. He will bless you with His presence and His power and His provision. That's the promise. And those promises never fail. In every circumstance, in every situation, those things can be ours. But it depends on what comes first in your heart. Because if those things are really not that important to you, I mean, we always say they are, especially when we're in church. But if those things are not most important to you and you are more concerned about the physical things, then we need to at least acknowledge that. And to understand that even then, God will still intervene for us. He will work for us, but it does not mean that we're always going to get what we want. Jesus says we need to look at what's most important in our hearts because that's going to determine how we live. And that is especially true when we have challenges. Because if we are centered in our relationship with Jesus, if the love of God is so strong in our lives that that's what we know, that's what we rely on, that's what we feel, then we can get through the rest of it. That's the promise. But related to that is point number 2. And that is that worry happens best when we only give God half of our heart. Did you hear what Jesus said about money? Well, that also applies to anything else in your life. You cannot serve 2 masters. One of those masters is anxiety. If you are anxious, if you are depressed, if you are so down and worried and so concerned that you can't even act, that's where your life is going to be. But if we have a fuller view, if we give everything to God, if we understand His power, if we do truly rely on Him, that gives us the capacity, the ability to be everything that we need to be so that we will get through everything that we're dealing with. But if you give God only half your heart, He can only use half your heart. We need to give Him everything so that He can work in us in the way that only He can. Through His Spirit, through Scripture, through the encouragement of each other. All of these things go together, but God's got to have all the pieces. Even if your heart is broken, God can put that back together. But you got to give Him all the pieces. You got to give Him all the pieces. I think the other thing we have to understand is that Jesus is telling the truth here when He says these things. We can see this in our own experience. Whatever you treasure, well, that's where the desires of your heart's going to be. He says that. And then He goes on to say, you can't serve these 2 masters because you're going to hate one, you're going to serve one, you're going to ignore or despise the other. That's just the way it is. We just can't do anything other than that. He says, that's why I tell you, don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear. And you know what? I'm going to tell you, this doesn't really resonate for me. I doubt very seriously if it resonates much for you, because I bet you can't remember the last time you didn't know when you were going to eat. I'll bet you can't remember a time when you went to the closet and you couldn't find anything to wear. If anything, we have exactly the opposite problem. So this doesn't really resonate with us. But I want you to look at these as substitutes for whatever does resonate for you. Look at the things that concern you, and they should. And then look at what Jesus is saying here. I think it really comes down to a couple of things. He's saying, you're going to have to rely on Jesus. You're going to have to rely on God to provide for you the things that you need. And that's really point number 3. Worry is a trust issue. It's a heart issue. If you're worried, it may be an indication, especially if the worry is just oversized, if it's just too much, if it's extreme. If you've got that kind of worry, then it doesn't seem to me like you are trusting God very much. When Jesus talks here, He says, God will give you what you need, and He already knows what you need. That does not translate as God's going to give you everything you want just the way you want it when you want it. But what it does confirm for us is that God is aware, God is involved, God is going to do something, and that's where we need to put our emphasis. Because we're not abandoned, we're not alone, we're not left to our own devices. We are in this relationship, and He is never going to abandon us. That's not who He is. That's not what He does. We can count on Him because He loves us so much. I just want to flip over to Romans chapter 8 for a minute to kind of drive this point home. Because if you look at what this passage says, we get a real glimpse into this. What shall we say? If God is for us, who can be against us? Since He did not spare even His own Son, but gave Him up for us all, won't He also give us everything else? What do you need? Not what do you want. What do you need? The promise seems to be that if we go to God with the things that are on His heart, the things that are important to Him, the things that truly get to what we are all about, then we can count on God to give us those things because we are his children. And even unspiritual people know how to give good gifts to their kids. God is not going to desert us, and he's not going to let us down. And we have this promise that the Holy Spirit will help us in our weakness. We have this promise that everything will work together for good if we're truly called together into the purpose of God. And then he goes on to say, I am convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love. Not death, not angels or demons, not fears for today, nor worries about tomorrow. So today, tomorrow, not even yesterday, should hobble us and hinder us when it comes to our ability to reach out to God and to let him make us what we are not. You know, in this passage, Paul says there are two ways of looking at life. He says you can look at it from an evil, and I'm going to change that word to human. There is the human perspective. And then he says there is the spiritual perspective. And I want to encourage you to look at how you pray and how you process your concern and your worry, and to simply ask yourself this basic question. When you deal with these issues, are you looking at it purely from a human point of view, a material perspective where it's all about the quick fix? Or are you more concerned with the spiritual perspective, the way that God looks at these things, where he's going to give you whatever you need to get through and to get by, because that's what's going to grow you and make you more mature, stretch you into what you're capable of becoming. But the other thing is, if you go back to Matthew chapter 6, Jesus also says worry is absolutely useless. It does you no good. It can do you a great deal of harm. After laying it all out, he says to his followers, all that worry that you're doing, can it add one moment to your life? Powerful question. Think about all the energy that you pour into what you're concerned about, the things that you cannot control, the things that you just don't know what to do with. If we will channel that into prayer, if we will channel that into a reliance on God, then good things are going to happen. Philippians 4, don't worry about anything, but pray about everything. Tell God what you need, and don't forget to thank him for what he's already done. That's part of the package. But worry is absolutely useless. It's like the treadmill that I use. I'm on that treadmill a lot during the week. And at the end of the week, I'm no further than when I first got on that thing. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of motion. But I'm not getting anywhere. And I think sometimes when we're caught on that treadmill of anxiety and fear and uncertainty, we spend all that energy, all that time, and at the end of the day, at the end of the process, we're no further along. We don't even get the benefit of the exercise. So recognize that worry does you no good. If you go back to Matthew chapter 6, one of the things that he ends with in this whole section is that we just can't predict what's going to happen. We can't know what's going to happen, except that, and this is the final point, worry is inevitable. You're going to have concerns. You had concerns in the past, you have concerns now, you're always going to have concerns. I saw a study this week, it was really instructive. Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow. He says, every day has enough trouble of its own. Don't worry about tomorrow. And what he's saying here is take each day and each struggle, each worry, one at a time. Do not let them build up. That's when things begin to gang up on us. You can take the anxiety in your life as long as it's measured, as long as it's manageable. But we get into trouble, all of us, when all of these things start to gang up, when they all come together, when they all pile on us to the point where we lose our perspective. And after a while, we just don't have the energy to keep going. God says you don't have to operate that way. We can take these challenges as they come. We can deal with them one at a time, understanding that we don't need to get ahead of ourselves. A study that I saw this week said 40% of the things that most people worry about, 40% are things that never happen. Can you look at your life and see that so much of what you worried about in the past never came to be? It also said that 30% of the things that the average person worries about are from the past, things that cannot be changed. And so how ridiculous is it that we would worry about things that are never going to actually happen, or that we're going to be so obsessed with things that have already happened and we can do nothing about? That's 70% of your worry right there. Unbelievable. What I'm trying to say here is that we have the ability to work through these things if we keep the right and the spiritual perspective. But we will always suffer if we allow the human side of us to dictate our emotions and our response and our trust in God. We've got to be able to invite him into the mess, to allow him to take care of circumstances and situations that we cannot hope to do ourselves, and then simply trust that he will get us through. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 says, God does not give us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. So you can be scared, or you can let God strengthen your knees. You can let God bolster your heart. You can let God fill you with the love you're going to need to deal with the situations that are so difficult. He will give you the power that comes from way beyond you to inform the situation. But it is going to take some self-discipline so that you do let him take the lead, so that you do your part, but you still trust in the promises and the relationship that you have from God. Years ago, Susan and I and my brother Jim were traveling in Asia, and we were near Hong Kong, and one night we got to this place on an island. No vehicular traffic at all. We're on this island. We're tired. We're cold because the night is really raw. We've just had enough. So we go to the one place where there are rooms, and we ask for a room. And the woman behind the desk says, "Do you want an ocean view room, or do you want a mountain view room?" Well, it's late at night. We're leaving at the crack of dawn. So Susan says, "Which one is cheaper?" She says, "The mountain view room." So we take the mountain view room. We fall into bed. It was a terrible night. We just froze because there was no heat in the whole place. But in the morning, my brother Jim throws back the window curtains, and all of us just dissolve into laughter because we've got a mountain view room, and the mountain is right outside our window. This far. The mountain is right there. You can't see up, you can't see down, you can't see to either side. The mountain is right there. And I think that's exactly what worry does to us. When worry and anxiety are in your face instead of the love and the power of God, that's all you're going to see. And that's going to dictate what you do. So the key here is very simple, very simple. Worry springs from what comes first in your heart. Worry happens best if you only give God part of your heart. Worry is a trust issue. Worry is absolutely useless. But worry is inevitable. So let's do it the right way, one day, one challenge at a time. The bottom line, don't worry, no. That's what the song says. Don't worry, be holy.